There's a man covered in ham. Literally, his whole body is covered in wafer thin ham. The camera pans out. We see that there are numerous packets, empty packets of ham everywhere around the room, disregarded, left over, ripped open. You see the cellophane like cover coming off. Some have been cut open, some are thing, but they're all empty. They're all displaced all over the room. And the camera pans further out, and we see a woman stood there. She's kind of rubbing her hands. She's got like some kind of residue on her hands, some kind of ham residue, and she's got a look on her face as though she's a bit confused, a bit disgusted by what she's done, what she's been forced to do. Maybe, I don't know. We don't know at this point. But this scene is playing out like this, and it's weird. Don't know what's going on, but I know what questions I have. I want to know, why is that man covered in ham? I want to know how they managed to get all of that ham from the shop, and I want to know what this woman's role in this situation is. Is it innocent? Is it strange? Is there something more sinister going on? I have clear questions, and I can make a decision as to whether I want to move on and find out about this potential ham crime. We don't know, or it might be a merry situation. We can only read on to find out, but we are clear. We are clear on what our questions are.
Welcome to The Fix. Sit down with copywriting experts Nick O'Connor and Glenn Fisher as they review, discuss, and improve real-world copy sent in by you. This is The Fix.
Obviously, this is insane, and what I've described in this little opening scene is a crazy situation, a stupid situation, because I'm a stupid person. And whilst Nick is out of action and away gallivanting around the UK at the moment, he's been across to France, he's just been up to Edinburgh, I thought I would talk to you and not give you a little quick episode into something that I've been thinking about recently, from a number of, I've seen a number of different sources that prompted me to talk about this. One, I've just been recording some feedback for copywriters in our academy, and I noticed this was something that kept happening. So I thought, that's interesting. Secondly, I did a consulting day a week ago. I think it was a week ago. I've barely got any track of time. And this came up again. It was a situation whereby we were revealing information and we realized that we were raising too many questions. So that got in my head. And then I was looking on LinkedIn and looking at various bits and bobs. And I realized that a lot of copywriters were doing this. And I think it's a challenge that a lot of copywriters face, especially if you're just starting out. But it's quite like a cerebral thing to think about. And you get quite a lot of advice around this that is kind of adjacent to it sometimes, or gets a bit confusing. And I don't know, I never know the true answers, but I don't quite know how to properly express or name this challenge at the moment. Answer on the postcard, feel free to comment accordingly. But what I'm thinking about, and what I'm realizing so many copywriters struggle with, is partly I want to kind of lean into the idea that it's around storytelling, and it's around the idea of the kind of logic of the stories we tell, of the copy that we present to people. But I think it's actually more around questions, and it's about how we manage the message that we want to transmit, that we want to express to our reader. And I realized that most in most situations, what we're really doing as copywriters is that we snare someone's attention, and we do so by giving them what you could call fascinations or what have you, or little tidbits or strange little things that are going to get their attention. And we do this in the form of headlines mostly, on the page. But if it was like a car advert or a radio advert, it might be an image or something that you listen to, but something out of the ordinary, something interesting, something that disrupts the reader. But what that does is it arrives at the reader, it arrives at our audience at a point where they are not interested in hearing about it. They're walking along, they have no thoughts or feelings about the product or service that you're selling, but you arrive and go, hey, I've got this thing, I'm going to try and get your attention. There's a man covered in ham. As soon as we do that, we raise questions in the reader immediately. We can't help but do that. In my ridiculous, silly case, I'm raising the question, why is this man covered in ham? And then I'll reveal that there's empty ham packets in. So I start to see how that was done. And then there's a woman stood there, and it seems for all the world like she might have covered this man in ham. And I'm breadcrumbing these details. I'm answering these questions. Now, as silly as my example might be, I have a clear understanding that of the questions that I will be prompting in my reader with the images, with the details that I share. So if I put a man covered in ham, I know the first question my audience is going to have is, why is that man covered in ham? Why and how, perhaps. So immediately I've gone, right, okay, they need to know why he is, how he is. So then I've shown them that there's empty ham packets everywhere. So, okay, it's come from there. And there's a woman there who appears to thingy. So we're still intriguing the reader. We're still prompting new questions. So it's like, in the case of my ridiculous example, which I can't believe I'm managing to labor this far, but let's go with it. Let's run with it. Why not? We've got more questions now. Was she happy to do it? Was she, has she done it against her will or what have you? We know we've got more questions, but we're managing those questions. We're managing the how we breadcrumb the details, but also how we order the questions that our audience will have. And I realize that's why I come back to the kind of dramatic logic. We understand the logic of the questions that our audience would ask. If we can understand that, then we know we are naturally led to what we have to reveal next in the copy. And this is what I see so often in headlines, in squeeze pages, in landing pages, in email newsletters, whatever you want to call it. There's a lack of understanding and realizing that by raising too many questions in the way we attract attention, we actually confuse the reader. We lose them, and the more questions we pile on, the more details, the more confusing it will get, the more overwhelming it will get, and the more likely we are to lose that reader. They won't want to read on. They won't care anymore about the questions. So copywriting, in many ways, I kind of realized, is just a control, is controlling the questions and the order that we answer those questions. So if you start thinking about it like that, when you come to write a story, or where you come to write an email or what have you, every detail you put, you have to think, will this raise a question? Or rather, it probably will. What question will this raise? And as soon as you've got maybe 3 or 4 questions, you've probably got too many. Like, you've got to start answering some of those questions. Now, when we talk about open loops, people kind of immediately assume, all right, okay, I've got to open a thing and then I've got to keep it secret all the time. But that loop might close and then open again with a new question. So it's about management. It's not about just like going, this is this, so this is this, this is the answer. You can keep it going. But understanding and being aware of how many questions you're raising in your audience's uh, subconscious, not in their subconscious, but in their consciousness, they're going, all right, okay, so I need to know that, I need to know that, I need to know that. You've got to be aware of that. We see it in many headline complexes. The other day we were looking at one in the live call, and we saw loads of great detail, which seems like great detail. So it might be this person does this weird thing, which leads to this weird thing, which does this weird thing, which is this weird thing, which is this weird thing. And you've got to get in before this particular date because there's only this many places and what have you. And you can see these kind of almost overloaded headline complexes. You can see it in across all kinds of copy, all forms of copy, that people overload it because they assume to snare attention you need to completely overload the reader with weird things that they're going to lean into. But as I say, if you overload them with too many weird things, too many weird details, what you're really doing is just you're highlighting too many questions. And as I say, the longer you go on without paying those questions off, the increased likelihood is that you're going to lose that reader. So you have to be aware all the way through your copy what questions you are asking the reader. Now, one of the ways you can do this to go to kind of pivot to a practical way to test your copy, if you think your copy might be raising too many questions, might be losing the flow, is to simply at the end of each line imagine the dialogue that you would have with your reader if they were sat there immediately. So for fear of appearing insane, let's take my ham-based one. If I say, first line of my thing, there's a man covered in ham. If I just said that, what would the audience respond to? What would be the initial thing? They'd say, why is he covered in ham? So I'd go, all right, well, there's a load of packets of ham there, empty packets. So I'd go, all right, okay, that's how he's covered. It's come from that, but that still doesn't. So I've gone a little bit further. I know more information, but I don't know why he's covered in it still. So I'm like, well, okay, like why are those packets all empty? I've added another question now. So now I showed the person, in this case, this woman, we appear to have opened these packets and covered this man in ham. So you can see how at each stage I'm thinking, what would the audience think? What would they ask me? And I go to the next stage and I try and, breadcrumb information each time, being fully aware of what the question is that audience would ask me based on the information I've given them. If I find at some point that information, if there's too many questions, I'll try and reduce the amount of questions that I'm raising, and I'll simplify it, and maybe I'll amplify the actual idea to make it more interesting or more intriguing in a different way. Or I might then play with the actual expression of it, so it's more entertaining, it's more captivating in a different way. But at all times, I'm being aware of what questions am I raising in my reader's mind. And I'm imagining that audience sat there live with me as I'm writing that copy, as I'm working through it. What are they asking? And as soon as I've got too many questions, as soon as I can't answer them all, or keep that thread without having like 3 or 4 threads running down, I know I've gone too far. I know I've gone wrong. This in turn allows you to, it gives you a guide as to what you need to write next. Another problem I've noticed a lot of writers that we work with have is that they almost become overwhelmed and paralyzed, not knowing what thing to explain next, what section in a promotion to do next, or where a blog should go, where an article should lead. Should I be doing the credibility now, or should I be explaining what the deeper truth is? Should I be doing a step-by-step thing with bullets in it? What bit should I be doing next? And for me, and I've noticed in the feedback that we give, it always is kind of, well, you've got to do the bit that comes naturally next. Obviously, that's no use to anybody, me just saying that. So this is why I've been thinking about this. And the reason for me, the natural flow of articles, of promos seems to come so inherently to me, is because I'm thinking like this in terms of what question have I raised in the reader that I have to immediately answer now. And therefore, that when I've established what that question is, i.e., why or how is that man covered in art, I need to deal with that to a certain extent. So I reveal that little piece of information. I can still hide other pieces, as I say. You can still open new loops or kind of keep one slightly open still, but you are aware of what needs to be said next to answer that previous question that you've raised in the reader's mind. When you do that, that naturally gives you a natural flow through a logical process of what you need to go through. Now, obviously, people counter with you don't sell on logic, and that's for the back end of promos and all that kind of stuff. That's not really what I'm talking about when I talk about the logic, the internal logic of an argument. What I'm saying is, when you are opening these loops, when you are doing these things, you've got to think. We'll still be working in the emotional storytelling zone and all of that kind of stuff, but you need to have in your head, as the copywriter, an internal logical framework where you're thinking, I've said this, what questions is that raising in my reader? Which ones do I need to answer immediately now? Which ones can I relegate and deal with later? If you do that, it will naturally give all of your stories, all of your copy, and all of the sections, really. I mean, it works predominantly. It's important to have it. It's important to have it in stories, but it works throughout any section of the thing. What questions are you raising? Which ones need answering now? Which ones can you hold for a little bit longer? If you go through that process, you'll find that A, you will engage your reader for a much longer period, and B, you will see naturally where you need to go and what things you need to cover off in your copy. If you skip those, if you skip a section, if you don't explain something, that's going to be a point where the audience, the reader, would naturally stop and move on. And when I say move on, I mean literally leave your piece of copy. So this is why we've got to be absolutely uber aware of the questions that we're raising in our copy. That's all we ever do. We just are putting questions in front of people and we need to answer them. So we need to be hyper aware of what questions we're asking. And that can come from the smallest details. It might be, as I say, if you've said something, this is urgent, if you don't explain why it's urgent, if you don't at least give some clue as to why it might be urgent that you can then later expand on, you're going to be in trouble, because that's another question the reader asks. If you've got an urgency play in a headline, if you've got an intriguing, strange thing that they've never heard about before, if you've got, if you're new to them and they've never heard about you, if you go into a cold lead so they don't know who you are, so you've got a credibility question to answer, if you've got strange details like packets of ham and whatever madness and real details you might have in a piece of copy, you've now got 4, 5, 6 questions going on. You can't keep them all open for the whole length of the piece of copy. So you've got to realize, right, where are those people? What little clues can I give? What breadcrumbs can I leave throughout? What do I need to answer now in full and answer, or tease and answer, and then answer later on? It will help you guide, but start thinking in terms of what questions am I raising in the reader, in the audience's mind, and it will unlock a whole. You'll realize probably that you've got too much information, too many details, probably too many ideas. Perhaps the number one piece of feedback we give to all copywriters, no matter what level they're at, is that they've got too many ideas in their headlines, and that they need to choose one and amplify it. And this is what's going on underneath that. When you've got too many ideas, you've got too many questions. The audience is going to have too many questions, and therefore you're not going to be able to explain it quickly enough or clearly enough. to be able to keep their attention for any length of time. So you need to reduce some of those ideas, focus on the ones that you can answer, that you can guide the reader through at a pace that allows you to give the information that you want to give them and need to give them to persuade them of the sale. So stupid ham-based opening and example, but hopefully you start to see what I'm getting at, and you start to see that this is a way, it's kind of a framework, if you like. It's a test you can put on your copy to think in terms of what questions are you raising in the reader's mind. Imagine that reader next to you, and imagine that at the end of every line, what are they asking? This isn't that kind of thing where you see people saying, ask so what at the end, and if you haven't answered it, delete it. I saw someone the other day said, if you ask so what, and it after every line, and you haven't answered that question, you've gone wrong. That's nonsense. That's incorrect. I'm going to say that's wrong. If you've maybe gone 3 or 4 lines and you've still answered, yeah, you've probably got a problem. But after every line, that's just insane. What you've got to do is manage what information you are breadcrumbing through that. Which questions can you partially answer? Which questions can you leave a little bit more open? Now, which questions do you need to pay off straight away? But think about those in terms of that reader as a dialogue with your reader. If you were sat there explaining it to them, what questions would they be asking? Which ones gets closed? Which ones remain open? And manage your way through your piece of copy thinking like that. And I think that, as I say, A, it will make sure you keep readers engaged for much longer, but B, it will give you a guide as to what things you need to cover in your copy, what sections come next, whether you need to answer that question, which might be a credibility question, or it might be a benefit question. It might be someone asking, how did you come about this, or what have you, or why is it important to me? Whatever it might be, it will give you the answers that you need to cover off, and you can start, you can work through that way, and it will make it a lot easier rather than sitting there staring at a piece of copy and thinking, where the hell am I going? So think in terms of questions, questioning which questions are you putting in the reader's head, and at what stage are you paying them off? Hopefully that will help you write their copy. I mean, that's what we're trying to do, isn't it? Anyway, so we'll be back next time. It will either be me and Nick, or it will be me and a different Nick, as I'm interviewing Nick Osborne, who is now in Canada. He's been working for AWI for a long time, catching up with him, interviewing him soon. So he will be coming up on the show. Me and Nick will be back pretty soon. I noticed when I was doing a bit of admin that quite a few subscribers on YouTube don't receive our newsletter. If you haven't got that, we've got a load of free guides, load of free stuff, and extra details on there. So go to thefixcopywriting.com, get yourself signed up. It's free. We send loads of advice and loads of different stuff out there. And as I say, there's a couple of guides in there at the moment which you can download on the newsletter. And we have quite a lot of interesting new stuff coming up, which we'll be telling you mostly about through that. So if you aren't signed up for the newsletter, go and sign up. It's free. Thefixcopywriting.com. Otherwise, I'm off to find out whether that woman covered that man in ham of her own free will, or whether she was hired to do so. I don't know. Will we ever know? Who knows? That question will remain unanswered. Until next time, goodbye.
If you enjoy The Fix and want to get access to even more good stuff, join the Fix Accelerator today. Get access to special masterclasses from Nick and me, watch expert interviews with industry legends, join live copy feedback sessions every week, and get connected to our very own private copy network. Visit thefixaccelerator.com for more information.